Hello, nerdy romantics. I'm so excited to be here live with you, talking today about the accidental proposal. Yay! So, the accidental proposal is the the second book in the Accidental Lovers trilogy. And yes, it will be a trilogy. Spoiler alert, just in case you didn't know that. But the first book, of course, is The Accidental Swipe. So, The Accidental Swipe came out last year in July, the end of July last year, and The Accidental Proposal came out this year in June, the end of June. So at the moment, right now, it is in Kindle Unlimited. It is on Amazon. So the ebook is on Amazon. The paperback is everywhere. But as of next year, we will have the ebook everywhere, including libraries, so everybody can get it. I'm a big proponent of libraries. So tonight we're going to talk about the accidental proposal, and we might talk a little bit about the accidental swipe, but we will also talk about what's next in the trilogy, what is next for Jason and Fortune, and we'll also talk a little bit about this. I bet you didn't know that this was out as well. This is called Secret Second Chances. It is in ebook on Amazon at the moment, but will also be everywhere next year, hopefully. But we'll talk about Secret Second Chances and how that fits in with Jason and Fortune and how that fits in with everything else. So stay tuned. This is the Nerdy Romantics Podcast, and I'm your host, Y.M. Nelson. And we're here live talking about The Accidental Proposal by me, Y.M. Nelson. And, today I'm wearing a Captain America t-shirt because, of course, this is a little Easter egg to a scene in The Accidental Proposal. But for everyone out there, if you're out there, put in the comments what your favorite scenes from The Accidental Proposal are, or maybe even what your favorite characters from this series are. And, let me know what you think about that. Right now, as far as the Captain America shirt and the Captain America scene, one of the reasons why I put that in the book is because I'm nerdy and I like Captain America. So, that's one reason, but it actually goes to another reason of why I write the characters that I write and how I like to make them authentic. A lot of times in romance novels, you'll see the heroine maybe a morning after kind of thing, and this is a morning after kind of thing. So a morning after scene, and maybe she puts on his shirt, and of course she's swallowed up in his shirt. And that's not going to happen with Fortune and Jason. That's not going to happen with a lot of my female heroines because I write plus size main characters, curvy main characters. And, while Fortune is not, she's a short woman, but while she's not as tall as Jason is, and while Jason is a big dude, Jason is not, a hugely big dude. And Fortune is plus size. So, as a plus size woman, even with a tall guy who may have a little bit of a beer belly or something of that nature, she's still gonna put on his shirt and the shirt is gonna be too tight. And so that is the nature of the Captain America shirt scene. She puts on this shirt. The shirt is a little tight on her. Does Jason like that? Yeah, he really does. But it is part to me of the authenticity of a plus size woman. And even though he's a big dude, he is not a, he's still going to, she's not going to be swallowed up in his shirts, basically. So that's a little bit of where that goes. In the first book, The Accidental Swipe, when they were having a moment, she talks about his hand on a certain part of her waist and why you know, she's very aware of where his hand is on her waist. And as a plus size woman, I know what that feels like. Somebody's hand is on your waist, and you're like, there may be some fat rolls there that I'm not really happy about you holding on to. And I'm not sure if you're turned off by that, turned on by that, or what. So she has a moment there. She's aware of what her body looks like and what her body possibly looks like to somebody that she's with. Doesn't mean that she's ashamed of her body. It just means that I'm aware and I know what other people think, and I am going to safeguard myself from that. So, it's one of those authentic kind of scenes that I like to put into my novels to let everybody know, hey, if there's a movie that's ever going to be made out of this book, this woman is not going to be skinny, okay? She's just not going to be skinny. And we're going to make this authentic. We're going to make this layered, and we're going to make this a little bit nuanced. So what about you? What are some of your favorite scenes or favorite characters? Obviously, let me know in the comments. There are a lot of scenes here in The Accidental Proposal that I kind of did also as Easter eggs. I love a good Easter egg in books. And a lot of my Easter eggs, I like to, if the people are not outright nerdy, I like to make sure that they have a little nerdy going on. So, yeah, Jason has a Captain America t-shirt, but also in the very beginning of the book, Jason actually goes and when he's going back home from Fortune's house and hanging out with his buddies or hanging out with his buddy Graham, they are gaming and they're playing Mortal Kombat. So, I mean, there are going to be a lot of nerdy nuances, even if the characters may not be outright nerdy in a lot of my books. So, what about Jason and Fortune and the whole cast of characters? What do you think about those whole cast of characters? Well, for me, Fortune was the first character that I saw. So that is why The Accidental Swipe is Fortune's book. So this book is Fortune's book. And a lot of what happens in what we see in this book, we see a lot of it through Fortune's eyes, even though both of these are dual point of view. If you haven't read them, they are third person dual point of view. And I love third person. So that's where we're going with that for the near future. But I guess I'm kind of just getting started with the dual point of view. And what I've noticed is there's always going to be one of the couple, one of the main characters is always going to be in the comments, and I'll let you know in just a minute. But one of the characters is always going to have a little bit more airtime than others at times. And so, because The Accidental Swipe was Fortune's book, The Accidental Proposal was Jason's book. And so I think that's why you saw a lot of Jason in this book and you didn't see a lot of Fortune. In The Accidental Swipe, you saw a lot of Fortune going to work, a little slice of work and a few of her friends. And even though you get to meet more of her friends in The Accidental Proposal, you don't really get to see a lot of her life in this book because Jason is going through something, y'all. He is being confronted with something he's never really been confronted with in his relationships. And while I imagine him in his backstory, I imagine that he has been in interracial relationships and he always loves curvy women. We already know he's never dated a plus size woman until Fortune because we've said that. But he's never really been in a relationship exactly like this one, where it's an interracial relationship. The woman is plus size, and he's really seriously thinking about marrying this woman. He really loves her. So he's really serious about her, which is a different level when you actually introduce somebody to, your friends, especially your close, longtime friends. Yeah, it's a little bit, it's a little bit different than saying, hey, this is the girl I met, at the club last night. Just totally different. And so there's a lot going on there. But yeah, this Accidental Proposal is Jason's book. So I've noticed that a few people have said, well, I'm not sure where Fortune is, or this feels a little whatever. And it's because the first book was Fortune's book. This book is Jason's book. So we're getting really into, what he has going on in his life and what's going on there. And so that's why we step back from Fortune a little bit. But what we do see here is we see a little more ensemble kind of cast of characters. What we're going to do with these characters, well, I'll let you know in a little bit. But from the comments, I love that Sporgi is your favorite character, Millard. I do have a story about Sporgi. Sporgi is actually from the Accidental Swipe. And Sporgi is actually a plush toy. And it is a corgi in a spacesuit. And the actual story about that whole scene and how that whole scene came about. So this is a little bit of how writers write and how we do things. Actually, The Accidental Swipe, I worked on it during one of, I guess that was 2019, in November of 2019. I was working on it for Nano. I didn't win Nano that year because I don't write that fast. And November is a very, very busy month for me. But one of the things that I love to do during Nano was NaNoWriMo. They have a YouTube channel where they do writing sprints. And in all of the writing sprint sessions, they have prompts in case you are kind of stymied. like you don't know exactly what to write about. So, one of the prompts, it was a side prompt actually. It wasn't the main prompt. There was a main prompt, and then people started talking about this plush toy, kind of how I have my little teddy bear here. So, they had a little plush corgi with a spacesuit on in the background as we were writing, and that was kind of like a side thing. So in that session we nicknamed it Sporgi, and then we had a writing prompt about it. And of course, from that, I just wrote on that writing prompt for some reason. I had Sporgy in the back seat of Jason's car when Jason is going to the gala. And that is also the moment, when Fortune audibly says, "I love you" to Jason. And the fact that that happens, and part of it is because she's looking at the space corgi plush toy in the back seat. And why does he have this plush toy in the back seat? Well, he has this plush toy in the back seat because he does have a niece who is, elementary school kid, likes plush animals. So that's why he has them. And to say that you're looking forward for more appearances, you may see Sporgy again. That's all I'm going to say on that. But a little bit about the rest of the cast. So the rest of the cast in the Accidental Proposal, we get to see, in the Accidental Swipe, of course, we got to see two of Fortune's best friends, and we got to see some of Jason's best friends, or parts of Jason's best friends. But in the Accidental Proposal, because it is Jason's book, we are seeing, the whole personalities of his best friends. And so his very best friend, Graham, we know him as an egotistical dude who's a little bit oblivious. That's what we're going to say about that. Ron John is basically the guy the practical guy of the group, the guy who has the clear level. He's clear, he's level-headed, he's practical, and, he sees things as they are, and he doesn't pull any punches. So, he says it like it is. Seth is a little bit hot-headed, more than a little bit hot-headed. He is he is the wacko friend that believes in conspiracy theories and craziness like that, and ones that you're gonna have to kind of talk down. It's like, hey, calm down, it's going to be okay. But he's also the guy who gets the keg, as they call him, the guy with the keg, or the keg guy. But, one other thing is he doesn't pull punches about who he's mean to. He is a jerk. He is a straight up jerk. We don't like him. And unfortunately, he is the villain of this particular book. I will say this, writing him, and in particular, I'm not really good with writing villains. I don't like to get in that headspace of just pure evil. I don't. That's not why I write romance novels, to get into the headspace of pure evil. No, we don't want to do that. And so it was hard to write Seth at times, but he is a special brand of evil. He is, a racist and misogynist jerk. And, he's basically everything that I try to avoid in life, knowing, someone like this. And it was hard to get into his headspace at times. But in order to really kind of write him as authentically as I could from their perspective, both Jason and Fortune's perspective, you had to kind of stay in his headspace. And that wasn't that wasn't fun. However, I will say that, and if you've read The Accidental Proposal, the author's note, which I think I will move to the front of the ebooks because I think it really needs to be more of a precursor, is that I wrote the black moment scene, in other words, the dark, all is lost, this is the worst thing, this is rock bottom, kind of whatever. I wrote that scene first of this. That was the first scene I wrote because that was the scene that came to me. And I started this book from there with the premise that, we have somebody evil out there that we got to deal with. And unfortunately, that evil happens to be best friends with, or good friends, I should say long-term friends, not necessarily good friends. Because just because we've been friends with somebody for a long time does not mean we're really good, close friends. And that's actually evident with Jason and his buddies, because he has a different relationship with each one of them. So the fact that he's really close with Graham, and he's just seeing some eye-opening things about Seth. And they were both in college together, right? They've all been friends since college. Lets me know that, there's a little bit going on there. Just because you've known somebody a long time does not mean you're the same level of friends with that person. And, I think a lot of what happened with him and with the whole friend group is that Seth kind of came along with the package, right? That was the first thing. But then the second thing was that they excused a lot of his behavior. They just kind of let it go like this, right? And I think for both Jason and for Graham, because Jason, Graham, and Seth are all white dudes, right? They're all white guys. And because I think they are all white guys, there's a certain privilege that happens where you can just overlook certain things, or you don't have to see certain things because certain things don't necessarily affect you. And so when Seth is saying something, hateful and out there, Graham and Jason, just probably for years, I imagine that this has happened for years, because I imagine Seth has been this way since he was a kid. And there is some bonus content for out there where if you want to know what goes on, what made Seth the way he is, there is some bonus content out there. And the link for it is in the back of The Accidental Proposal, where you can get the bonus content for why Seth is the way he is. And because he was that way when they met him, I think they just wrote it off as him being a jerk. And they could write it off as him being a jerk because because of that privilege, I believe, because of the white male privilege that's there. They can just overlook that. It's like, especially considering that Seth is looking out for them, right? Seth talks about, he's looking out for, he looked out for Jason or whatever, or, him warning Jason about Fortune is his way of looking out for Jason. And maybe in the past with other females that might have worked, but Jason is in love with Fortune. And Jason is not going to have that. And Jason actually knows, a lot about Fortune and knows enough that he loves Fortune. So I think, it's really now that Fortune is in Jason's life that everything that Seth is doing is coming into relief. It's coming into focus that he's not just a jerk. He is being a jerk to certain people, and we have not been paying attention because we have been wrapped up in this wonderful privilege where we don't have to pay attention. And, I think that that's very real. I have to say it. I think that that's very, very real that that could happen. I want to be appalled by it, but I don't. I think that I see it happen. I see it happen a lot. And Ron John, again, with his practical mind or whatever, he knows what's going on with this dude, right? He knows that. But he is also the one that's saving face. And two, he has two good friends in Jason and in Graham. And he's not going to let this bad actor, mess that up. He's just not going to hang around when Seth is acting like a jerk. And he says this, in the book. So I think that's part of what happens when the longer we're friends with somebody, the more tolerant we can be of them. I think we are probably the most critical of people when we first meet them because we don't really know them. Then once we get to know somebody, a lot of things we tolerate because we know about the good times, right? Because we know about what's going on. But Jason has his set of friends, and I wanted to make sure that I rounded out Fortune's set of friends with Celeste. So we also see in the accidental proposal that Fortune is a new friend for y'all. It's not a new friend for her. But I think I took this a little bit from my own experience. I have some incredible best friends. Some of them, I see them all the time. One of them, I used to work with them, right? So I would see that person all the time, right? One lives very close to me. So I see that person more than I would, my best friend from college who I don't get to see very often. And I think I kind of wanted to put that in Fortune's case. She's going to have best friends, a long time best friends. And unlike Jason is a different person. His longtime best friends all hang out on Friday night at the graveyard. But Fortune, her longtime best friends, she knows them from different places. And so she hangs out with them in different ways and in different places. And so I think with Celeste, especially with Celeste being as, well off as she is, Celeste moves in a little bit different circles every day than Fortune does. right? And two, Fortune also has a job in marketing that is also taking her out of office after hours kind of thing. We're going to have this celebration for this client, and we're going to show this client how to do this and all this kind of stuff. So basically, that's why I think we meet Celeste at this point, but why Celeste is a best friend. And also why we don't necessarily see Alahe as much and Louis as much, because we are not seeing Fortune's work life in this particular book, because we're focusing on Jason's work life. And we're not necessarily seeing, you know, how when she's hanging out with Louis, we're not seeing that as much, even though we see it some when they're doing the dates and things like that. We don't see it as much because we're seeing Celeste, and we're getting to know Celeste, which is kind of how I wanted to do that. I wanted to make sure everybody knew Celeste, because there is a third book out there. And we're going to see them all together, and we will see this whole cast of characters come together. And on that note, it probably is a good time to say yes, the On Purpose wedding is coming, and hopefully it will be out next year. I am currently writing it as we speak. And so while The Accidental Swipe was Fortune's book and The Accidental Proposal was Jason's book, the On Purpose wedding is going to be obviously both of their books, right? But it's both of their books, and it's everybody's book. Everybody's going to get a little bit of a cameo here and there and everything like that, because everybody gets involved when there's a wedding happening. A lot of times, especially if we're going to throw a big wedding, it's not about the bride and groom. There's always somebody's auntie out there doing some craziness and trying to, get something going. There's always mothers and mothers-in-law and families getting together and realizing, oh, this is what the in-law side is like. Oh my. There's always gossiping, going on. And sometimes we don't necessarily, because we get caught up in that, and because we might not be the bride or the groom or part of the people that's getting married, because all that's happening and all that's going on, we forget about the people that are getting married. And what in the world are they thinking? And so that's essentially one of the big themes of the On Purpose wedding. It's going to be, yes, this is not an accident. In other words, this is the absolute opposite of accidental. This is on purpose, but everybody thinks it's an accident. It's like everybody is like, is this for real? These two people getting married. The other thing about this, and the other thing that kind of puts a little bit of a twist on this, is that Jason is in his early 40s. Fortune is turning 40 in The Accidental Proposal. And for American society at this moment, for some reason, it's still, oh my gosh, these people are getting married at this age? It's still like, is this a second marriage? That's what people do. They give you the side eye, and then they say, is this the second time you've been married? I mean, you've never been married before, and you're 40. You're 40. How old? And I think that is just an antiquated way to think. you know, that's a dumb way to think, in my opinion. as a woman that is almost at middle age, in my opinion, I I've just started to be an adult. There's no way that I could possibly get married at 21. Like when I was just out of college, I'm thinking about this now and I'm thinking, when I was just out of college, I'm like, are you kidding me? No, that's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Yeah, I was still so much of a kid, you know. My 20s were just basically an extension of college almost for me, except I was responsible a little bit more than I was in college, and I did pay my bills and go to work when I was supposed to go to work. But other than that, it was it was a straight up party for me in my 20s, right? In my 30s, I was just coming around to, oh, I've actually got to be an adult and I've got to do something that actually fulfills me. I think it wasn't until I turned 40 that I realized I'm not fully being authentically me. And even though I had been writing the whole time, I've been a writer since, I've been a I should say I've been a novel writer since I was 16 because I wrote my first novel length work when I was 16. But did that see the light of day? No. And I don't think that I had kind of my authenticity. I didn't really know who I was and realize that writing is what I need to do. That needs to be in my life at all times, right? I need to be writing at some point. And not knowing that at that time, I've wasted a lot of years, but at the same point in time, I didn't really realize until I was 40 that, hey, this is who I am. This is what I like to do, and I need to be okay with it. And I feel the same way about marriage. I don't think in your 20s you're really, I mean, not everybody, I should say. So it shouldn't be looked at as if somebody's getting married in their 40s, it shouldn't be looked at as is this a joke or if somebody's first getting married in their 40s. It shouldn't be looked at as is this a joke? Is this crazy? But that's what's going to happen to Jason and Fortune. People are going to be looking at them like, are you nuts? And then, there's always the people that want to hijack the wedding. This is what I want to do. And that's usually the mamas. They're like, oh, we need to get together and do this. And this needs to happen. And, all this lovely stuff. But there are a lot of hijinks and things that are going on that I'm writing out now that I'm so excited to share that, share that with all of you, especially all of you that are loving Jason and Fortune and are even loving Sporgi. I think that's so cute. Or, loving all the other cast of characters. And of course, in that vein, with the cast of characters that's out there, I have some exclusive news about that vein. And it starts off with shout out to the TBD book club. Miller, we saw you in the comments. Shout out to that book club because they did pick The Accidental Swipe as one of their book club selections during the time when they were having their book club. And I got so much good information from that book club. I was able to actually kind of see some characters in a different way than what I was seeing them before. And then also, I want to shout out to all the reviewers who reviewed The Accidental Swipe and especially the reviewers who reviewed in the very beginning before the book came out, because between those two kind of moments where I got feedback, I have actually been thinking a lot about some of the side characters in the Accidental Lovers trilogy. And while the Accidental Lovers trilogy, at this point, we never say never, but at this point, while we are thinking that this is going to be the end of the line for Jason and Fortune being main characters, several of their side characters have been speaking to all of you. And in essence, or therefore, they've also kind of been speaking to me as well. And so I am actually also thinking about taking some of the side characters from the accidental swipe, the accidental proposal, maybe even one side character from the on purpose wedding, and giving them their own books in another series called the Sly Fox's Nightclub series. And for those of you who are actually reading Accidental Lovers, you already know what Sly Fox's Nightclub is all about. So there you go. Exclusive news, exclusive news. But that is not all the exclusive news. Actually, my newsletter subscribers, they already know this, but they already know some of this, I should say. And that is why you really have to be a newsletter subscriber, okay, everybody? So you can get this exclusive news as well. But this particular bit of exclusive news that I'm about to talk about has to do with Secret Second Chances. So Secret Second Chances, backstory here about this book is that this started off in the very, very beginning in 2017, back in the day, 2017. It started off as 24 Hours of Freedom, a short story that I said, I think I'm going to try this self-publishing thing, and I think I'm going to put it out there. And so I did, and I put it out there. Owen and Michaela were the main couple there. And it's a friends to lovers, second chance romance. So for all of you who love that friends to lovers, second chance romance, this is that. And so it started off as a short story. And because people ask me what's next, like, where's it going? Then that's when I started writing I wrote another part onto it, 48 Hours of Bliss. And then I wrote another part onto it, 72 Hours Too Long. And then, I put them all together into a box set. And then I said, you know what? I want to make this box set just a little bit longer. And I really want to dig into Owen and Michaela as nerds in love. And so that's one of the tropes as well, nerds in love, because Owen is this computer genius and Michaela is she is a marketing guru, but she's downplaying it a little bit to just be one of the guys because, of course, she was part of the nerd herd. And no, I did not take that from Chuck. That just came out. But in essence, with Secret Second Chances, I didn't want to leave these folks. Now, Owen and Michaela, they're in the same universe as Jason and Fortune. They're just not friends. But they don't really know each other. But they're in the same universe, and I didn't really want to actually leave Owen and Michaela's, their circle of friends. And not necessarily their circle of friends, but I didn't want to leave the world that I had created for them. And so instead of making Secret Second Chances a standalone novel, it is now part of the Nerds in Love series. Now, this series is going to be a series of standalone novels. In other words, you don't have to read them in order. Each book will feature one couple. So while Secret Second Chances is featuring Owen and Michaela, I've got at least 2 other books planned out, and they will each feature a different couple. But they'll all be nerds. In some form or fashion, they will all be nerds. And I have out now in the ebook version. I'm holding up a paperback. Yes, the paperbacks are not out there yet, but hopefully next year they will be out there. But right now, because I have decided to put them in a series, I wanted to make sure that you got an idea of the next book. And so right now in Secret Second Chances, which is at the moment I'm recording this, it is out on Amazon. And at the end of that is a new sneak peek to the next Nerds in Love book. And that Nerds in Love book is called One You Slept On. I don't know why I said what, but it's called The One You Slept On. And I also am writing a little bit on that one. That's not the main thing. I will get Jason and Fortune. You'll see their wedding first. But I didn't want to leave kind of the world that I had created, which was a very nerdy world. And it's actually very close to, I don't want to say very close to my brand, but it's kind of what I'm about. I'm a nerd in love, right? I'm a nerd who likes romance. I like nerdy things and I like romance. And so that's what I'm writing about now. That's also what I'm, podcasting about. So we do have a podcast community, and it's not just a podcast community. If you're a reader who doesn't listen to podcasts or listen to reader podcasts or fan podcasts like Nerdy Romantics podcast, it doesn't mean that you can't be part of the community, because we talk about romance novels. We talk about, yes, nerd pop culture, nerdy books. We're going to get into a lot more of the intersection between nerdy and romantic with, sci-fi romance and fantasy romance. We had a romantasy author on, Geneva Lee. We had her on the podcast, on an episode of the podcast. And it was just wonderfully enlightening to talk with her. So if you're a fan of any of that, you should be part of the Nerdy Romantics community. You can start off being part of the Nerdy Romantics community by subscribing to the newsletter, or you can really be a part of the Nerdy Romantics community by being a member of our actual community. I also have a Facebook group, Nerdy Romantics Facebook group, but being on my newsletter is probably the best way to just get started and learn what I'm all about. That and reading my books. But if you subscribe to my newsletter, you will get a copy of Stardate. And Stardate is my Trekkie romance story. And I feel like with Stardate, that basically is the best representation of kind of what I like to write about. If my main characters are not actual nerds, I like them to like nerdy stuff, right? So I don't write science fiction romance. So these are not actual Star Trek aliens. Like, he's not a Vulcan, and she's not a Klingon. It's not like that. So if you don't know anything about Star Trek, you can still read it and still get the gist of it. But the thing is, they are really into nerdy stuff. They're really just regular folks who are into nerdy stuff and who connect on that level. And that's who I like to write about. If they're not actual nerds, they're into nerdy pop culture stuff, which I'm into. So, in a nutshell, that's me. And I just want to say to everyone out there, whether you are, watching this live, or whether you're watching this in the replay, or whether you're listening to this on the podcast. Yes, this will be a podcast episode. So whether you're listening to this on the podcast, I just want to thank you for being there, for reading my stories, or being interested enough to listen or watch here and want to read my stories. I really hope that you enjoy them. They are essentially for all those out there who love a steamy, nerdy romance. These are not clean romances, but they're fun. They're fun, and yeah, they've got a little spice to them. So I just want to thank everybody for being here, for watching, for listening, and especially for reading. And come back again. What a great episode. Want to get show notes from this and future episodes in your inbox? Then subscribe to Nerdy Romantics newsletter at nerdyromanticspodcast.com/subscribe. Nerdy Romantics newsletter not only has show notes, but nerdy and romantic recommendations and sneak peeks and first looks from my books. And while you're listening or watching, don't forget to like and subscribe to your podcast provider so you can get episodes as soon as they drop. Thanks for listening and for watching.